Thank you very much. I am Tony McDonald, and I'll be facilitating the call today. So welcome to the Mid-Atlantic Regional Planning Body's public webinar. You all have already met Sarah Lewinsky, so she's our technical support for this call. So just a reminder that if you are having any technical problems, please tap in the chat box, and she'll try to do her best to troubleshoot that problem to the extent we can. So we have a fairly full agenda today, which we'll be moving through pretty quickly. Generally, I want to focus on a few things. I'm going to remind you that all material has been posted for review in advance of the scheduled January 24th meeting and is available on the RPB website. For today's agenda, I want to focus on a few elements as we work through. One is we'll go through the welcome and introduction, which we're having right now. We'll move quickly into a presentation and summary of the annual report and work plan from Darlene Finch, one of the co-leads, and then we'll go through each of the specific work group efforts that the agencies are focusing on. So we'll go through those as we work through the agenda. At 11:50 thereabouts, we'll actually hop into two action items. There's two action items for the RPB today. One is on ocean indicators, and we'll have some stakeholder input after that session, and RPB discussion and action, and that will be followed up by an action item on ecologically rich areas. Again, I want to really focus on the stakeholder input sections and assure that the speakers will allow time for folks to comment. Do note that comments all will be taken through the Adobe Connect, so type in comments down in that section, the chat box that you see down towards your lower right-hand side. And again, if you have any technical issues, please let Shannon know, and she'll try to address them to the best she can. Remember, please, that comments can always be made at any time by emailing the RPB at midatlanticrpb@bohm.gov, and they will be posted on the RPB website. This webinar will be recorded, and we will capture all of the comments as well that you type into the chat box. So that will be posted after the webinar as well. So I just want to acknowledge the co-leads for the RPB and for this call, Darlene Finch from NOAA, Kelsey Leonard from the Shinnecock Indian Nation, and Laura McKay from the state of Virginia. So we'll hop right into it. So with that, we'll turn it over to Darlene Finch to lead the discussion of the semi-annual work plan and progress report.
Thanks, Tony. Good morning, everyone. This is Darlene. I want to start by saying that the Mid-Atlantic RPB thinks it's really important to report on the progress that we've made in implementing the Ocean Action Plan and describe what we think we can accomplish, what we intend to accomplish over the next 6 months. I'm pleased that we're making progress. There are constraints, no doubt about it, but we remain committed to moving forward with the actions that we agreed to in the plan. The 2017 draft semi-annual work plan and progress report, yes, that is a mouthful. It describes the progress that we made from June to November of 2017, and it looks ahead to January and June of 2018. Any stakeholder comments that we get, either through this webinar or through the emails, we'll consider as we move forward with implementation. Comment, which is the work plan is our best estimate of what we can accomplish over the next few months. Nevertheless, there are many factors beyond our control, like lapses in federal appropriations, which threw off our in-person meeting. They impact our implementation efforts, but we're still committed to moving forward. I'm going to call on the leaders of some work groups to provide some highlights of what was accomplished during the last 6 months. They don't have slides. They're just going to speak for a couple of minutes about it. We're going to be discussing actions related to ocean indicators and ecologically rich areas later, so they're not going to be part of this general updates. After the work group updates, we're going to have an update on the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal, and then we'll open up for comments and questions from stakeholders. So I'm going to start by turning to Sherilyn Lau with EPA to talk about ocean acidification.
Thanks, Darlene. Hi, everyone. I'm Sherilyn Lau with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm on the steering committee for MACAN, the Mid-Atlantic Coastal Acidification Network, which is co-led by Katie Goldsmith of Marco and Grace Saba of Rutgers. And I'm pleased to share with you our progress so far. As many of you are aware, the Mid-Atlantic Coastal Acidification Network, MACAN, helps to address the RPB's Ocean Action Plan, Healthy Ocean Ecosystems, number 3, to develop a regional monitoring network and to achieve objectives including better understanding coastal and ocean acidification, coordinating guide regional research, monitoring and modeling, and to serve as an information hub with a focus on coastal waters and impacted species from the south of Long Island to the Virginia-North Carolina border. Since our last in-person meeting in June, MACAN continues to convene our monthly work group calls to discuss specific components of the draft plan for ocean acidification monitoring and research priorities, which will be 2 white papers slated for June 2018. Furthermore, you'll see in the work plan in more detail our next steps between now and June 2018 to develop these plans. The sections of these plans will include existing monitoring, technology, optimization at presently monitored sites to build a more robust monitoring plan, identify specific sites of importance, fill gaps, and develop opportunities and partnerships to improve monitoring capacity in the region. The plan will have information incorporated from webinars such as these, workshops, and workgroup meetings. This robust plan from the estuary to the open ocean will be vetted through experts as well as the RPB. Also, I would like to note that MACAN has worked with the data portal team to continue to update the public map with additional layers to inform the public of available acidification data, but also aiding our workgroup discussions on gaps and needs. As a hub for information, MACAN continues to build a network of experts by coordinating webinars. MACAN began its second series of webinars in December of 2017, which can be found at midacan.org, and I can provide that in the little chat box. The webinars so far that have been archived on the site, as of December 2017, we had one on citizen science. In January, we had one on modeling change in carbon dioxide in Chesapeake Bay. And in February, Research Priorities Workgroup did a report out. Next month, on March 6th, we'll have a webinar on our monitoring plan workgroup. So with that, I just want to say that you can feel free to check out the midacan.org for events, archive webinars, and general information about the work we're doing. Thank you.
So next up is Laura McKay from Virginia on marine debris. Laura.
Thanks, Darlene. I want to thank my work group co-lead, Buddy LeBou of EPA, and the work group that we have for marine debris holds teleconferences monthly. It's a very robust group with 27 members representing EPA, NOAA, and all 5 states. And what we've been up to over the past few months is preparing a grant proposal to NOAA's Marine Debris Program. And a pre-proposal was submitted and then selected for a full proposal. And want to thank Marco for being the submitter, the fiduciary agent for us, and making that happen. So the full proposal was submitted last December, and it requested about $145,000 for a project that would run from August 2018 through July 2021. And in a nutshell, the project would expand a balloon release reduction social marketing campaign that was developed in Virginia. It would expand it to the entire Mid-Atlantic. So the funds would go mainly toward campaign materials and several subcontracts that would allow for focus groups to be conducted in the other 4 states, some more video work, and outreach to venues and vendors that are involved in balloon releases. So we hope to hear this spring as to whether we will receive that funding, but as mentioned previously, we are under continuing resolution through March 23rd, and NOAA will not be able to make final decisions on what to fund until we have a final budget for FY18. But our hope is that we will hear sometime in April or May, and by the latest June, and that work could begin in August if we're funded. So our work plan for the next few months is basically 4 tasks. We're working on a Mid-Atlantic marine debris collaboration portal. We had created a database of projects in the Mid-Atlantic so that we would understand what's already been done and identify gaps. And then NOAA has begun to develop these regional portals. First one was in the Great Lakes, and they have one set up now for the Mid-Atlantic. So we will be spending time this semester entering our database information into that portal. And then the work groups, some of the work group members are going to be trained end of this month or by next month in how to update that portal and how to use it. So the site should be available, we hope, by sometime next summer. The other task we're working on is trying to develop marine debris indicators, and that is something that that we will wait to hear what happens with the outcome of this morning's call and decision on indicators. But assuming that we do want an indicator about marine debris, we are trying to track down data that would be suitable for that. And then finally, we have presentations at the 6th International Marine Debris Conference coming up in March, and several of our work group members will be presenting there. They have 750 people attending that from 55 different countries, so that was going to be a great opportunity to collaborate. So if the NOAA grant is funded, we'll begin to work on that August start date, and New Jersey is looking to hopefully hold another social marketing training workshop in the northern end of the region this spring or summer. And again, if we get the funding, Virginia has funds to hopefully retain Doug McKenzie Moore, who's the guru of social marketing, to coach us on how to expand this social marketing campaign to the entire region. If the grants are not awarded, then the work group will be looking hard for other funding sources. And that's it for us.
Thanks, Laura. Darryl Francois from BOEM is up next on ocean energy.
Thank you, Darlene. BOEM is actively working on our wind energy and offshore sand actions as they align with our ongoing mandates and efforts. And I'll talk a little bit more about sand in a few minutes, but with regards to renewable energy offshore, particularly offshore wind, just to touch real quickly on our environmental studies program in summer of 2017, we linked the data portal with BOEM's environmental studies program information system, which is developed in partnership with NOAA. This is a robust search tool that allows for specific text and map-based searches to find relevant study information, including summaries, final reports, peer-reviewed publications, and whatnot. And following on that, we will post our Atlantic Science Year in Review 2017 later this month on the BOEM website, which will be an update to the environmental studies program of the studies we've completed in 2017. And also, we've had a very unique opportunity to collaborative working with the Block Island Wind Farm to do real-time environmental observations on those facilities of both installation and operational activities. And the reports that are coming out of that effort will be available in early or a little bit later in 2018, possibly this spring. And we will be using that information to inform our decision-making on review of projects in the Mid-Atlantic area, or throughout the Atlantic area, actually. We've also, on the more planning upfront, have reviewed New York's offshore wind master plan. We held an intergovernmental task force in October, a New York State task force meeting to discuss a path forward, and then we held a joint New York and New Jersey task force webinar December 4th. Plans continue to hold another New York Bight task force meeting this spring. and hopefully we will then use that and information that we're gathering to launch a call for information later this year that will inform our efforts in additional leasing in the New York Bight area. We have been active in stakeholder engagement and outreach. We've sponsored several workshops with in Atlantic Offshore Renewable Energy Development and Fisheries, hosted by the National Academy of Science Fisheries Steering Committee in November. We briefed the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council in December, and we have just most recently met with additional fisheries groups just this past week. On our horizon, outside of an additional stakeholder engagement, outside of the fisheries area, we are planning a offshore wind and maritime industry knowledge exchange this coming March 5th and 6th in the Baltimore area, Linthicum Heights, Maryland, where we hope to engage with planning with the U.S. Coast Guard and engage with maritime vessel traffic stakeholders in identifying issues associated with the location and planning for offshore, the development of offshore wind projects. Just as a reminder to folks, we do have on the BOEM.gov website, if you go to the Renewable Energy tab, under that tab we have a page on stakeholder engagement that keeps folks up to date on all of our stakeholder engagement efforts. And so please stop by and see what we're doing and give us feedback on how we can improve our efforts. Thank you, and I'd like to turn it back over to Darlene.
Thanks. I just realized I think the next section should be maritime commerce and navigation. So Chris and Doug, you're up.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Chris Scrabe with the U.S. Coast Guard and Doug Simpson alongside of me. I want to just give everyone an update on our Maritime Commerce and Nav Safety Working Group. We held a second webinar on the 1st of November, approximately 65 participants. We're very happy with that. Our next one we've sent out is on the 26th of April. And some of the things that we've done since our last regional planning body meeting back in June, we were able to go up to Monmouth University where they had the Blue Ocean Forum Summit, 2030 Summit in early October. And prior to the summit, there was a Joint Ocean Council initiative, JOCI, of the Marine Transportation Resilience, and to discuss the importance of the MTS, with the importance of navigation safety being a cornerstone to ensuring a resilient marine transportation system. And as we looked at the potential threats to navigation safety of our naval forces and commercial vessel traffic, we also determined the vulnerabilities associated with human error, mechanical and electrical casualties, cyber intrusion, or improperly managed competing ocean uses in an already busy offshore and harbor approach area. As Darrow indicated, we're looking forward to the 5th and 6th March of the BOEM and Coast Guard Navigation Workshop Knowledge Exchange. It gives a great opportunity for wind energy developers, commercial shippers, industry, and federal regulators, a Venn diagram of all three of these different entities coming together to share their knowledge and best practices for offshore wind and marine transportation coexistence. One of our Maritime Commerce and Nav Safety Workgroup collaborators, Mr. Sean Klein, who's from the American Chamber of Shipping, will provide an overview at this seminar on the importance of the efficiency of a marine transportation system and the critical aspects of the MTS to our U.S. economy. In addition, the Coast Guard will provide some subject matter expertise as it reviews its navigation safety risk assessment as part of a cooperating agency with BOEM as we go through the NEPA studies with the wind developers when we look at a wind energy area. We'll also discuss potential regulatory tools such as fairways and traffic separation schemes that are currently used throughout the world to ensure the compatibility of offshore wind energy turbines alongside the commercial and naval vessel traffic. We believe that this is a great opportunity as bringing the regional planning bodies' 3 C's of communication, collaboration, and coordination together, and we look forward to working with BOEM and our stakeholders to ensure that we look at the best practices, share our knowledge to ensure offshore wind and maritime transportation can coexist. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Darlene.
Thank you. And it looks like for sand management, Daryl, you're up again.
All right, Darlene, I'm back.
Okay.
I just wanted to let folks know that we'll soon share the National Sand Inventory and Marine Minerals Information System, which will inform the data portals. The MMIS, just to reiterate, the Marine Minerals Information System is a centralized data repository for offshore federal sand resource information, and we will using it to coordinate with our federal and state partners on data and information. And just a quick point out to the data portals as being a key resource for information sharing, and thus our efforts to make sure that our sand inventory is coordinated with the data portals as well. If you're interested in some of the Marine Minerals program and getting a little bit more in-depth discussion of our activities in the Mid-Atlantic, BOEM's Ocean Science magazine, which was published and posted on our website in November last year, focuses on this particular issue, focuses on marine minerals, and includes an in-depth discussion of our Mid-Atlantic activities. The final rule governing how BOEM goes about negotiating non-competitive agreements for sand, gravel, and shell resources was published in the Federal Register on October and became effective on December 4th. And so that will be our guide moving forward in how we negotiate non-competitive agreements. And for those states that are interested, that will be our regulatory guidepost. Through an interagency agreement with NOAA, we are undertaking a programmatic regional geospatial assessment of EFH to support our leasing decisions in offshore waters. And we've invited, received, and evaluating several ideas for studies in the Mid-Atlantic for fiscal year 18 and 20. And then coming up in June is we are meeting with the Association of American State Geologists at the annual meeting, which will be hosted by the Delaware Geological Survey, June 3rd through 7th, where we'll hold a joint session, provide an update on BOEM programs and marine mineral program efforts at developing a national OCS sand inventory. And I will stop there and hand it back over to you, Darlene. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the last work group update is non-consumptive recreation. Kevin Hassel from New Jersey.
Thanks, Darlene. So basically our work group developed a survey with the help of Rutgers and the Portal team, and we deployed that last summer. Basically we're just trying to get a handle on where people are going, what they're doing, and other conflicts and issues they're having while they're out there. We had over 1,000 responses, so I think it was a pretty successful survey effort. The data has gone through a preliminary analysis, and so our friends at Rutgers are kind of putting together a video walkthrough, kind of the slideshow of all the information that's there, and then hopefully soon we'll have that publicly available on the web. Another thing that happened last fall was Marco helped out with partnering with Surfrider to host 4 stakeholder workshops across the region. The objectives of that were kind of to help define what makes areas important, what conflicts people are having, and then actually to help explore how we can engage better with the stakeholder community. I think they were pretty successful meetings, but there was a kind of a mix of attendance at them. So we just needed to see how we can improve those interactions, if there's things that we need to do when we're hosting meetings to get more people out. So basically what we're going to be doing is looking through those surveys and the workshop findings. and see ways we can improve what we're doing and basically our outreach to folks. Hopefully soon we'll have the summary reports from those meetings posted, and then we'll start putting some effort into looking at best management practices on conflicts between rec uses and the natural resources. So that's pretty much it right now. So I'll turn it back to you, Darlene.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Thanks to all the presenters. Appreciate the updates. We're going to now turn to Nick Napoli for an update on the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. And Nick, you ready to roll?
I am. Thank you, Darlene. Good morning, everyone. This is Nick Napoli. I manage the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal on behalf of Marco. And in addition to Marco and the RPB Workgroups, the portal team includes Rutgers, Monmouth University, and EcoTrust. I'm going to briefly go through and try and summarize some of the content that's in the semi-annual report and work plan. I'll take it in two parts. First is the progress since June, and then next will be some highlights of our work plan through this summer of 2018. I'd just like to point out quickly that you've already heard a bunch of this quickly through the RPB workgroup update. So obviously we coordinate closely with the RPB workgroups and have a good relationship there where there's use requirements, data requirements identified through these workgroups and data products reviewed through those workgroups. So first, in terms of progress since June of last year, this slide's showing a couple examples. I'll try and go through a few quickly. You already heard from Cheryl and Lau about some requests from the Ocean Acidification Workgroup and MACAN, the Mid-Atlantic Coastal Acidification Network, to include some ocean acidification monitoring location data in the portal. That's been done. We've had a number of marine life updates, particularly bringing in the estuarine wetlands and seagrass layers that are available through federal data sources. There have been some updates in the socioeconomic folder in the portal, including coastal population density. Through collaboration with the Marine Cadastre, the security data have been updated, and that was a process where the Department of Defense updated their data, provided it to the Marine Cadastre, and the regional portal benefits from that. The top right image shows something we added recently. These are the areas of consideration per the NYSERDA, the New York Offshore Wind Master Plan. Those were included in the fall, and we certainly had a lot of questions about that and questions about related data. Last on data, I'd just like to say that we've been obviously spending a good amount of time, and some of you know this, reviewing some updated and draft fishing data, which I'm going to talk a little bit about more about in a second. In addition to data, we're also always looking for good ocean stories or use examples of the portal. There have been a couple updated stories in the last 6 months, and we're also interested in conducting trainings and learning from folks who use the portal, and we did complete trainings with each of the Mid-Atlantic Marco states and obtained some really good feedback on potential enhancements to the portal and how the portal is being used. So that's generally the progress since last June. I'll just say quickly, if you really want to stay up to date, go to portalmidatlanticocean.org, go to the news tab and choose the blog. That's the best way to find out what's been going on or to see data releases. In terms of work plan going forward, that'd be the next slide, please. Thank you. This is just one example I think folks are maybe familiar with. Really, the next 6 months, we're focusing on some of our most valuable data assets. And these are data sets which are probably the highest used data sets and also take the most time to update and where we want to get the most feedback from RPB members, agencies, and stakeholders. So what you're looking at here is an example of the communities at sea data that are currently on the portal. As I said, we have been spending many months in collaboration with the Northeast reviewing vessel monitoring system data and communities at sea data that will update the existing data sets on the portal. So we'll be updating 2015, 2016 vessel monitoring system data, and we have a whole suite of new communities at sea data that really start to hone in on and enable the user to look at which ports are fishing where using what gear types. So we expect that to be our next big release, probably in the early spring. Right now we're just revising some of the data based on the feedback, completing a lot of the documentation, and ensuring that folks are really aware of some of the caveats associated with those data. Next up is the Maritime, some of the Maritime data, and another really valuable data asset for us, which is the automatic identification system data. We have draft products currently developed for 2015-2016. In response to a lot of stakeholder feedback, these products looked at counting actual vessel transits instead of relative density. And we're also looking at monthly snapshots to show changes over time. So we'll be showing some of these data in some upcoming meetings, hopefully including the meeting that Daryl referenced in early March. Again, another update from that we heard a little bit about, in this case from Daryl, sand. We're awaiting that release from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management on potential sand resource areas. And once those data are available, we will integrate those into the portal. We're going to hear a little bit more about marine life, I think, during the ERA discussion, but if we don't get down to some of the details, one big update that is coming will be the second version of some of these models that feed products into the portal. So we will have new products for the bird and cetacean species that are derived out of this second version of models that incorporate a lot of new observations, and that will be probably about mid-year. We're always looking at other opportunities to add data. They come up all the time. We review data sets for relevance. How can we sustain this data stream long term? If folks have ideas, please reach out to us. In terms of stories and use examples, again, we're always looking for stories about the use of the portal. Please let us know. Use examples are really helpful to us in understanding how people are using the portal and to communicate that out to other folks. Last thing I'd like to mention that's going to be a focus throughout this year is really starting to look at what the long-term options are for managing the portal, maintaining the portal into the future. And so we'll be expecting that we're going to be reaching out to a lot of folks within the RPB and outside of the RPB to understand better what the long-term options are for maintaining the portal, keeping them up to date, and managing it into the future. That's all I have. Thanks, Darlene.
Thanks, Nick. So now is the time for people to raise questions, provide comments. I'm going to remind folks that the way we do this is to type into the chat box. Tony, I guess I'm going to turn it back to you, right? We have about 15 minutes to get stakeholder input. And Tony, you're going to kind of summarize the comments and
Right. Yeah, and I would remind everybody, there's no need to wait. This is an open chat window, and we will capture everything moving forward. So remember, if something pops up in your mind throughout this, or you think of something after this, don't wait for the stakeholder section. We'll make sure to capture that. So I just wanted to remind you of that. So that I will look and see. I see some folks are trying to provide some information and some questions, so I'll see multiple typers. That's always a good sign. And I want to thank all our presenters. Obviously, a lot of work's been going on. So again, I think we're going to try to figure out what we can respond to in terms of these questions, and some of these will just be taken under consideration by the RPB. So I see we have a question from Brent Greenfield regarding how long is this draft work plan open. Hopefully we're going back to Adobe Presenter. I just lost the visual for a second. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. So how long will the draft work plan open for input, and have any proposed action dates, given the delay in the January meeting, been changed? I will throw that back to the RPB if there's an appropriate response to that question. Dean?
This is Laura. I could maybe just summarize that we had posted the draft work plan back on, I believe it was December 14th, and then, had tried to say that we would have comments for 30, 45 days, and that we would finalize things at the January meeting. And of course, that meeting was had to be postponed till today's webinar. So it's been open for a long time, and I would defer to the other co-leads, but I would hope that we can be thinking about finalizing the work plans today, or if not today, very shortly. But Darlene or Kelsey, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that's right, Laura. I mean, I think we're still looking for comments. That's what we were intending to do at the public meeting. That's why we're having the webinar today. So if you have comments, please offer them here or send them into BOEM in the near future. We're open for comments. We want to respond to them, not respond to them. We want to adopt our work plan accordingly. But the sooner we have that information, the better, I guess, is the best answer. And I can't point to any major activities that have slipped as a result of not having the January meeting. I think that, deciding where we're going to go, how we're going to proceed on indicators and ERAs has kind of been held up because of the delay. But otherwise, people are doing the best they can to make progress.
Yeah, I think that's right too, Darlene. But the two decision points would be perhaps the only ones where there might be a little delay now, given the postponement of the January meeting. But hopefully we'll catch up.
Thank you. Matt Gove has a question regarding the June progress report. A review of cumulative impacts from New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland offshore wind energy areas was included. Is that still happening?
This is Darrell Francois with BOEM. I believe that's part of our studies program, and it is ongoing and not completed yet.
Thank you. One of our RPB principals has a question. It looks like he's looking for a little more information from Nick on the update on the Marine Cadastre FY16 shipping data on the portal.
Yeah, I went through that pretty quickly. I think if you're asking about the AIS data products, Chris, that I should actually see a new draft of 2015-2016 AIS data probably by the end of this week, early next week. And we'll be looking to review that with the Coast Guard, other agencies, and stakeholders over the next couple of months. And that will be vessel transits, counting actual vessel transits instead of relative density. We will have monthly snapshots in addition to annual footprints, and it will be for about 5 to 6 different vessel classes. So you can expect to be looking at that by the end of the month, and I'm hopeful that I will be able to show some of that to whoever's interested when we see some of you at the BOEM Offshore Wind and Maritime Industry Knowledge Exchange.
Thanks, Nick. That's great information to hear, and glad to hear it's positive. And I think our stakeholders will be glad to hear that as well, just to make sure we have updated shipping data in there from 15-16. So greatly appreciate all the efforts that you're doing there on that.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments folks would like to address at this point in the agenda? Okay, without seeing any typing, I think we're good to go, and we will move on to the next section. Thank you very much.
An email.
Say that again, please.
I'm on an RPB webinar. This is in lieu of our public meeting, which I'm not even paying attention to.
You're not on mute.
Yeah. Please, if the presenters are not talking to the group, please put your hand on mute. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, with that interlude, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is Mid-Atlantic Healthy Ocean Ecosystems action item on ocean indicators. So with that, I'll ask Karen Chalo to step up, please.
Thank you very much. That was comical. I like that. Sorry. Thanks, everyone. I have a lot of words on these slides. I'm just going to highlight a few of the things that have been going on. We've been very fortunate that a steering committee was developed to put to oversee a contract done by CBI of development of a white paper to give us some really excellent framework for looking at indicators and looking at themes, data category, different matrix, as well as data gaps, options, and they held webinars. So there was a lot of good groundwork that was done for us. We had a 2-day workshop back in July. A final report was completed in September, and would summarize the process of where we were and the level of stakeholder outreach that was done to provide some more input into it. Because we did get a lot of good input from folks who were very committed to providing some insights that they wanted to see on an indicator type of a program. And so we feel that we're in a better position now to make some recommendations to the RPB. But one of the first and most important recommendation to us is the transition into a formal RPB workgroup, because we're just a steering committee now from Marco that we're overseeing this contract. And so what we're requesting of the RPB is that we do become a formal workgroup of the RPB. And we feel that it's necessary because we do feel that the indicators will be an integrator of a lot of the information that goes on from the other work groups having to do with shifting species, ecologically rich areas, ocean acidification, marine debris. Laura was mentioning about looking at an indicator for marine debris, and the portal team. So we feel that we have a lot of crossover with some of those things, and that we could portray some of the things that they're saying in a logical database, or report out of some of that information so that it would be good for the public and as well as for the RPB members. One issue that we have, besides just formulating the work group, would also be identifying a federal code lead. So hopefully somebody will want to work with me as a federal, on the federal side, to keep this work group moving. One of the other parts that we looked at as part of our recommendations to the RPB was for public and the RPB as target audience for the indicator effort. We heard loud and clear that a lot of people wanted something that the public can go to for information. There's a one-stop shop that's out there. It gives them some information, and it would be a dashboard that people can appeal to, and then it has multiple layers to help them to delve down. And that's why we recommended the multi-level reporting dashboard that would target these multiple audiences. If you want the general information, boom, here it is. If you want to get down lower into the data and look onto different links to different databases and get into other more synthesized information or other types of information, boom, you have your avenues of how to get there. So it's a way to get into a lot of this level of information, depending upon the level of information that you want to know. And one thing we kept hearing loud and clear from a lot of the folks was, they would like to see indicator-type stories too, which is in line very much with things that are done on the portal, but we should remain neutral and not be value-laden. This is good, this is bad, this is, and so they really wanted to make sure that we did keep an even keel on presenting the information, that it's factual and informational. Another important item that we looked at too was as one of our recommendations for where would we put its indicator dashboard. And of course, as Nick was talking about, we talked about the long-term use of the portal, of the Marco data portal. Well, we feel that that's the location that we should really be placing our indicator dashboard. Here's a lot of the data sets that people are looking at. Here would be another level of information of looking at trends analysis or other sorts of things that would be going on. And we thought the data portal itself, the Marco data portal, was a great place to put this monitoring and indicator framework. Of course, we'll need some funds to do that. Of course, all these things take some funds, and so of course we're looking for different types of grants and other things, and that's something that we would move forward on and trying to make that happen. And one of the things too is that an issue that was brought up about the regional ocean assessment. That was done. It's not static. It's not dead. That needs to grow too. And we feel that with our work that we can integrate and advance the regional ocean assessment a lot further than it has been right now. So we need to put these pieces together. So our fifth recommendation is that something that we heard from our workshop that we did held is that we would have more theme-based. And so we came up with three major themes, which would be the living ocean, ocean conditions, and the human footprint. And we came up with types of issues underneath those things that allows us to better communicate and make distinctions of the different indicators that would be used to explain these different types of issues. Because people always were asking, well, what are you doing an indicator of? What are you talking about? And so it was best to link it back into a more of an issue that would be under each one of these things. And that's something we feel that we want to develop a lot further, but take this process forward. So our next steps right now, for pending approval of these 5 recommendations, we plan to solicit, if it's approved, to solicit members from the RPB and reconfirm the current steering committee members if they want to continue on this work group, and that we can move forward, identify a co-lead, and start deciding on specific indicators within each of the themes and issues, and work towards developing that dashboard pilot, try a few things, see how it works, see if the public is responsive to it, does it make sense, do they understand it. Of course, we'd have to draft some data agreements and maintenance plans for each of the indicators. Where's this information flow going to come from? Who's going to put the information together and characterize it? And develop some draft products for each one of the indicators. And so, but we did come up with our guiding, we have some guiding principles that we felt were very important, that were identified by the CBI team when they first wrote the white paper, as consider the existing indicators that they identified, and relate that back to the indicators framework. Hint, Katie has already been doing some of that, so just so you know, we haven't been totally, waiting for everything. She started doing some of that work, which is great. We want to highlight some of the indicators that are primarily ocean versus estuarine, because that was an issue that kept coming up. And the thing was that the primary focus would be on the ocean, but of course you have to integrate with the adjoining estuaries, and how do they balance between the two? What are we seeing with the two of those at that interface, and how are they equilibrating, or what is going on with each one of those areas? We want to prioritize indicators based upon their information value, and we know we need to not have 3 million indicators because there's no way we can manage that. So we would have to whittle down a lot of these things to a smaller set of sustainable indicators. And of course, look for data gaps and initiate looking for other data sets that are potentially out there, what we could target for information. So I hope that's helpful. And Laura, please, let's get us going and see. I want to hear what the RPB and other stakeholders have to say about our recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, so now is time for some open discussion, and I see Darlene is typing, but if folks on the call have questions, comments, thoughts for Karen, please type them into the chat box. And you see Darlene was asking for a little more explanation of prioritizing indicators based on information value. So Karen, can you explain that a little further?
Well, a lot of times you want to get a lot of bang out of it, and like something like, to me, like bottom temperature tells a lot of the story that's going on out there as to what's happening at the base, because that's what's impacting a lot of resources down there. Also temperature in the water column, where you're seeing shifts of species. So there's a lot of information that's gained by just having an indicator of temperature and telling the story of where resources are going, or where things are moving, and interactions and timing of issues. So therefore, that's one that would be very informative as to what is actually happening out there in the ocean. Does that help, Darlene?
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Okay.
There was one before me.
Yeah, somebody else.
Oh, yes. Swarna was asking, is there a timeline for this, considering the financial uncertainties involved?
Well, like I mentioned, she's wonderful. We've been so fortunate that we have her at Marco, and she has been looking at some of the indicators and just trying to structure them a little bit more along the framework lines. Once we hope that we have a work group, we want to streamline that process as much as possible to move forward in coming up with a sustainable list of indicators and something that we would work through as a work group, and then bring that out to peer reviewers and stuff, things like that. We don't hold webinars to do that with, where we wouldn't have to be high cost type of things. Working on the data portal, that's something that we have to look for money. We know that. But there's some things that we can do. We can start getting the planning done and the pieces done. So let's try to develop our system internally as much as possible, given the uncertainty of funding. Yes, that's a very real reality that we have to deal with.
Thanks, Karen. And looking at your work plan, you aren't looking to actually submit refined indicators for the RPB's consideration until, probably later in the fall of this year.
Oh, yeah. Not now. Not just yet, no. Oh, no. So we have a lot of fine-tuning to do, making sure that here is the indicator, here's data sets, there's a data stream that's a reliable data stream that we can make use of, that, we'll be constantly being able to, as our go-tos. We don't want to come up with something that nobody collects at all or does anything on. That would not be helpful. So we want to make sure that we, as we said, we want to whittle things down and come up with a recommendation that we can provide to the RPB and to the public to say, yeah, this makes sense. Okay, this will be pilot, more than pilot stage, and we won't be at the nth degree, but let's get started. We just got to get started. That's what we want to look for.
Great. Well, thanks again, Karen. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So with that, I think we can turn it over now to a full RPB discussion of the recommended actions. And I'm just going to advance our slides here to the next steps again.
Yeah.
And so RPB members, any discussion? And we can kind of hopefully take these in order. There's 6 points here, and so maybe we can just start right away with the first two. Really, does the RPB want to discuss the evolution of the steering committee into a formal RPB work group? Any thoughts on that? Any objections?
So Laura, let me make sure I understand this. Are we going to, I thought these were a whole series of recommendations we were making a decision on, but we weren't going to go through them each individual subsection. I guess I'm confused, a little confused about the process. Sorry.
Well, whatever is the RPB's pleasure, we could, I thought it might be easier to go through them one by one in case there's different opinions on each one. But if folks prefer, to speed things along, if there's no objections to any of them, we can move right to that and look at approving the entire set.
I guess I was just looking for what the end point was. I'm assuming that the end point is all of these are a bundle of things and we'll be asked to approve them. But you're just trying to tease out if there are any questions about each individual portion.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Is everyone what I would like to know is everyone comfortable with the framework we developed, the headers of those and the issue based and stuff. Because we went back and forth on a lot of those types of things, and that's basically what we came up with for right now to move ahead on. And we feel that we can provide a good usable product that would be helpful for stringing together a lot of the information that is presently available out there even on the portal and stuff. And this will be all linked in somewhat fashion through an indicator.
And that'd be your third item there, right, Karen?
Yeah, that we want to. Yeah, because we're not there yet. We have the specific ones. We have some that were developed. But we need to go through all of that. But we wanted to get the framework down pat first. Everyone's in agreement with that. Because this is a little different than what's being done in the Northeast, where they're going into develop an index we're not going into developing an index of putting a variety of different indicators into creating one number. We're backing off from that step. We're still keeping it down to the individual layers, and so we can follow that a little bit more discreetly. So it's a little different than what's going on in the New England RPB.
Right.
So we believe we can achieve a lot of the same goal.
Yeah. So, so taking maybe just the first two bullets here. Well, the first bullet is everyone in agreement that we should set up a full work group? Is there any opposition?
No opposition.
Great. So we'll say that's approved, Karen.
Thank you.
Go forth, and we'll have a formal work group. And then the second bullet is, are there any federal entities willing to co-lead this work group at this point?
Don't all jump up at once. It's okay.
Karen's a lot of fun to work with.
I will send out an email, okay, requesting potential participants in this work group, and I'll tell you, and also asking the existing steering committee members if they want to remain on this, and then also we can solicit for the federal once they see how much level of effort that they need to have level of effort involved, okay? I'm giving you a pass, federal agencies, okay?
Sounds good. All right, moving on to the third item Karen was looking for direction on is do people want to discuss these three themes that the steering committee had laid out of living ocean, ocean conditions, human footprint? Are people comfortable with that general framework? Any discussion?
Yeah. Are you okay with the terminology? Is that okay?
I guess, Karen, I think it looks great. One thing that comes to my mind, if we are going to add in the human footprint, whether the list would almost be expanded. I mean, looking at this, it's almost as if we have all of our kind of ERA components under living ocean,
right?
And then we have ocean conditions there, which is just straightforward. But then on human footprint, if I wonder if people want to discuss some more whether we should be adding everything, or is it right to limit it to these four basic categories? I mean, for instance, if we're going to document something like vessel traffic.
Yeah, I just moved it back. I just moved the slide back, okay?
So great. Thanks, Karen.
That might help.
I was looking at my hard copy, but that's great.
I know, but other people can't.
So any discussion from RPB members?
Just that I'm wondering why there's, under the ocean conditions, those are clearly physical oceanographic type parameters, but I note that on there's also water quality, which is number 3 on that list, and also water quality on the human footprint.
We couldn't figure out which one to put it under. Being honest with you, Joe. Just being honest here. And that's something we have to work out. What makes the most sense? Those types of things where...
I think the broad categories are fine, but again, then we're getting into the subsets.
Yeah, it does get hard. I remember, Karen, one thing that we talked about was that water quality sometimes is affected by human actions and sometimes not.
That's correct.
And so the things that are not, I think we thought could go under ocean conditions, but the things that are human-driven would go under that theme.
Yeah, like a nitrogen discharge could be under a human footprint, something that's coming from a sewage treatment plant out into the area, versus wind-driven or changes in wind in helping create sluggish bodies of water, so it reduces mixing rates, and so hence you can have eutrophication induced by something like that in shifting winds. Yes.
Right, or upwelling, natural upwelling, or who knows what. Yep.
Absolutely, right. So you could have different types of things. So that's why we weren't comfortable with just placing it under one. We put it under two of those categories. But we felt that those were issues that were important out there, and it's something that also was very relatable to the estuaries, because of people looking at a lot of nitrogen reduction in their estuary programs, and that there's a linkage then could be seen as a result of what's the water quality in those embayments versus offshore and how they are connected. And that was something I thought could at least loop into some of those folks too. And that's something that people could want to see, that how is that regulating, you know?
Great. I see Sarah Winter-Whalen has a comment back on sand management, and we'll come back to that, Sarah. But RPB members, any further discussion on this framework?
So I have a question. Ocean uses and socioeconomics, is that the socioeconomics of ocean uses, or is that something else?
No, well, what we had was people brought up at our workshop are ocean uses more clearly, like, you know, fishing or whatever, you know, maritime use, whatever the use might be, versus a socioeconomic as to value of number of jobs and people's, you know, number of jobs that are created for the activity or anything, those types of things too. So to bring in that level of effort, that's going the little steps further. You know, we have to engage some economists of how to work that out, of how to make it makes a lot of sense.
I think it's a good idea. I'm just not sure why they're lumped like that. That's my question. I mean, I think it makes sense to call out the socioeconomics piece. It just seems a little, I don't know. I need to go back and look at the whole report, because here it seems a little constrained.
All right. So these are things that we will work out as a work group. We need to, fine-tune, go back. We think about this. How do we link in all of our different potential indicators that we've collected so far, and see which are the ones that we can really detail out. Will we be able to do the full array of everything here? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not going to promise 100% delivery on everything in here, but that we can get to a point where we have good representative indicators that we can move the needle on some of these issues. I think that would be helpful.
Great. Thanks again, Karen. Any further discussion, questions from the RPB members? And I don't see anything further in the chat box on this, so I'm going to forward again to our next step slide and say, RPB, is everyone good with the work group going ahead under this framework to continue to work within those themes?
Joint staff concurs.
Great. Any objections?
No.
Great. All right, Karen, you're set.
All right, great.
All right, and then moving on to the development of a dashboard pilot, with the idea being that that's something that would sit on the portal. Again, we're not sure how far we can get with that with finances, but any discussion on that?
We feel that once we have something more of a product or more something that we have to go to, we can go to Nick and others and say, how is this something that can be potentially incorporated on? What are the things that would have to be done, so that we know what type of contracting or funding that we would need to get. We have to have that conversation. We have not had that.
Yeah. All right. Any objections to moving forward with this concept?
So this is Darlene. These three are all things that will actually require additional funding. So they're kind of things we want to strive for, things we'd like to head towards, but we may not, we want to be prepared to do, but we may not be able to do yet because we don't have the resources. We don't have all the data we need, and we don't have the resources yet. Is that correct?
I think, well,
right.
Karen, I'll let you answer.
Oh, absolutely. We have to strive to do some of these things, but at least we have a goal. This is what we're reaching towards. So I just want people to be comfortable that this is another use of the data portal is to house the indicators. And we thought that would be a good place since so much of the other information is there. There's storylines that are given there. There could be story. That's the whole concept of the data products for each of the indicators, is to develop a story for each one of those. And we felt that it was just, there's a nice alignment that was there.
I'm comfortable with heading in that direction. I guess I'm just, as the picture becomes clearer and resources become clearer, it would be nice to circle back on those items in the future. So I don't have any objections to them.
Great. And just a technical question here, because I heard from Joe, but just to remind other RPB members to, chime in if you have something to say, take yourself off mute and join into the discussion. So, okay, let's see. Oh, Sarah or Swarna had another question. If there are no resources, what could be a workable alternative considering this info that will be useful to the public also?
Well, it would just be a matter of reporting. It could be a report that the indicator work group could produce on an annual basis or something like that. So it would be more, it wouldn't be live or oh, I can look at it every month. It would be, okay, an annual report would be put together, and therefore, okay, this indicator shows this, and yeah, it would be a listing, and an annual report could be placed on the board. That's the cheapo way of going, but that's one way we might have to go.
Yeah, and I think you have, all the members of your work group are spending time on it and trying to dig up what data is available for the various indicators in this framework theme, and that's just a lot of work that people would do as work group members without there necessarily being a financial contract to someone.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Like I know in New York now too, we're initiating doing some oceanic indicators. We have a MOU with Stony Brook, and they're going to be going out later April, May, and start doing a variety of different types of measurements out there, from mid-water trawls to the carbonate series, the temperature salinity, looking at zooplankton, a whole bunch of different things. So we're hoping to add to the science and trying some things out too. And adding a useful data source for out there. So there are other means of doing some of these things, because that's what we need to go back and look at. Okay, what are we did see a lot of the existing monitoring programs, but what else has popped up since we started developing them?
Great. Okay, so one last time on the dashboard pilot, any objections to the work group moving ahead with the idea that this would sit somewhere on the Marco Ocean Data Portal? Any objections?
No.
Great. Okay. Off you go on that one, Karen.
We're going. Watch out, Tony. Here we go.
And then let's see, the next one, draft data agreements, maintenance plans for each indicator.
But that's when we get to the linkages of the data sets and things like that of, who would we be getting? NOAA would be giving us this lineage of data. Okay, we have an agreement with them, and how would we use it, and, how would we react with it and do with it and stuff. So those are the things that we would develop. Those are the things that we would have to develop internally and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To ensure quality of the data and stuff. So.
And that links to your last bullet there, the development of the draft product. So any discussion on those two or questions for Karen? Okay. Any objections to the work group moving forward on those two things?
No objection.
Great. We're set. Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Karen. And
we had a great steering committee. It was very good. So, and CBI, you were right on it. Thank you very much.
Good work.
Good work.
Terrific.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I don't know if we want to go back to Sarah's question on sand, or if she said no worries.
Yes, I think we should just acknowledge receiving that and
then move on.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, well, we're doing well on our schedule here. It's 12:09, and we're supposed to be at ERAs at 12:15, so shall we just jump right into that, Tony?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So, moving through these slides. So, again, I'm Laura McKay with the Virginia CCM program and the lead for the ecologically rich areas work group, and just a little background on where we've been. And I do encourage you who are listening in to, if you haven't already, at the top of your agenda for the meeting, there's a link to the recommendations on ERAs, which may help you to follow along carefully with what we're talking about, as well as these slides. But basically, oh, and I wanted to check too, Shannon, I know Jesse Cleary is on our webinar, but is he going to be able to speak? If I have a question for him, or if anyone has a question for him?
If he's not on the telephone line, then no, he'll have to respond via the chat box.
In the chat box. Okay,
yes,
great. All right, well, hopefully, Jesse, you can type fast if we get some questions I can't answer. So the process to date is that the Marine Life Data Analysis Team, we call them MDAT, based at Duke and involving a number of institutions, they have been working since 2015 to pull together over 6,000 data layers on marine mammals, fish, birds, and habitat types. And so they've synthesized that down to 75 to 150 layers, which is a huge accomplishment. And they've organized that into the 5 ERA components that were in our Ocean Action Plan as a draft framework, but which the RPB formally approved. And so that's a huge step, but it's still, a lot of folks are still feeling like that's a lot of data layers to have to look at to try to understand where ecologically rich areas are. So we've had 8 workshops and webinars to get input from stakeholders. We've collaborated with the Northeast RPB, and everyone's been looking at this data via a survey and webinars and trying to figure out what are the most appropriate ones to describe these 5 ERA components. And so the last workshop we had was back in November in Annapolis, and we had laid out 3 potential options for next steps on synthesis. And those are described fully in the recommendation document, but in a nutshell, option 1 was to not do any further synthesis, but just focus on the data that we have and organizing it into those 5 components and getting that on the portal and communicating very carefully about the data gaps and the confidence levels of the data. And option 2 was called classify and overlay, and that would have us determine logical statistical breaks in the distribution of each ERA component data so that you can, and then you could overlay those. And then option 3 was called classify and combine, and that was about classifying all the components as you would in option 2, but then creating an index. And so those were the 3 that we looked at, and the breakout groups looked at all those options, and we got a lot of input from folks on those. And at the end of all that, the work group took all that under consideration, and the work group recommendation at this point is that we go ahead with option 1, that we just need to do that. We need to get the data organized by ERA components, get it up on the portal, get really good communication about what that data does and doesn't tell you and what the confidence is and where the gaps are. So that's option 1, and we definitely want to move full steam ahead on that. The work group also recommended that we further explore option 2, the classify and overlay approach, during 2018. And the idea here would be to just look at a very limited set of layers where we have high confidence and feel like the data is fairly complete, and just test as a proof of concept what it would look like if you did try to classify that data on a statistical scale and find those logical breaks and then overlay them. So that is the recommendation. Option 3, almost everyone felt that was kind of a dream way off in the future, if ever, and that it was fraught with problems in terms of trying to, that it would just invoke too many value judgments as opposed to just the hard scientific data. So that's where we are on that, and I'm going to turn this over to Kelsey now to have us open the discussion.
Great, thank you, Laura. So it looks like in the chat box we did have a response just following up to Sarah's question if you want to take a look at that. And so with the presentation that Laura just gave regarding ERAs, is there any RPB discussion around the proposed recommendations?
I would just suggest that you just pause to be sure that there's any stakeholder input on what she said before you go to the RPB discussion, if that's okay, Kelsey?
That sounds great. So we'll do stakeholder input first. Please add your comments into the chat box. Okay, so we've got a question from Brent Greenfield. Will the RPB clarify the timeline for action for option 1, including when it would expect ERA data to be uploaded? Laura, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, and I will turn to Jesse if Jesse wants to type in there. I'm sure we will get to it as soon as possible, although as you heard from Nick, the cetacean and avian model updates are due this summer. So whether we would get all of the existing data up on the portal under those component themes, I doubt that would happen before, until after this summer. But Jesse, can you chime in on that? And Jesse is typing. Thank you.
Laura, this is Megan. I also just sent Jesse the call-in information if that's going to be easier for this conversation.
Oh, terrific.
And so Jesse said their near-term focus is on data updates, on the data updates that Nick mentioned earlier.
Yep. So that's getting those 2 models, cetacean and avian, done this summer, and then so I think it would be the next semester, the sort of July through December period, where we'd be working on option 1.
Okay, we have another stakeholder comment from Allison Chase. We support the work group's recommendations for next steps. I would like to know if a plan for ERA component data to be on the portal could be determined by April 2018 so that it can be adopted at the RPB's May meeting.
Okay, a plan for it. That sounds doable. But again, I do want to let Jesse and perhaps Nick Napoli too, if you're still able. I think Nick can still just talk. But I should think, we have an ERA work group call coming up March 6th, and we do meet monthly. It might be a little tight to have a plan developed and approved by the RPB by April. But I also want to say that as far as I know, there will not be a May RPB meeting, but more likely a summer RPB meeting. We're trying to stay on a sort of 6-month schedule. Any other folks want to chime in on that?
I think there's something out there on the website that said we were planning for May, but given a variety of reasons, we're going to have to push it to the summer. So that's right, Laura.
Yeah, Allie, if you can type in where you saw that about there being a May RPB meeting, that'll help us correct it.
Allison has written, currently the plan to determine this is noted for June. If the RPB is meeting in the summer, that timing may work, but the RPB notes a meeting in May in the work plan.
Okay, we'll look at the timing on that. I'm looking in the work plan now for ERAs, and it says that we do want to improve portal documentation on data layer, caveats, gaps, limitations, appropriate use by June. And all I can say, Allie, is we will do our best to recover from the January delays and get a plan together as soon as we can. But it's a little difficult to promise right now the exact timing. And I don't know if Jesse or Nick wants to weigh in on anything.
Well, this is Nick, and I'm happy to add any details as necessary, but I don't have anything really to add to what Jesse's statement about the near-term focus being on the model updates to make sure that we have the latest model data that will then fold into the ERA data, and that we are actively thinking about how the data could be incorporated into the portal. So it's not like we're not thinking about that right now. We are thinking about that, recognizing that once the model data, the new model updates are ready, that we'll at least be thinking about technologically how that could be folded into the portal.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. This is Jesse. I'm just glad to chime in here. And just to echo what Nick mentioned, I was going to write this, but then it's easier to say, just that, although we are working on this data update that Nick discussed earlier, we certainly are working on documentation for all of the models that are in that update. And so there is really a kind of parallel effort that's kind of going on that describes their appropriate use and uncertainty, et cetera. So that is ongoing, but we want to make sure we get that kind of big pulse of new models. That's sort of maybe more of a priority, although we are working on the documentation that is discussed in option 1 as well.
Great, and Allison Chase has just said it's more the fact that it seems useful to line up the dates so that a plan to do this work, list the ERA categories on the portal, doesn't just miss a meeting decision point. So if the work group can keep that in mind about making sure that the dates align as best as possible with the upcoming meeting.
Yeah, we certainly will. And our March 6th ERA work group call will really look at our timeline again and make sure that we've got things properly sequenced, that decision points aren't missed for the hopefully summer RPB in-person meeting.
Great. Is there additional stakeholder input for this part of our agenda? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone typing into the chat box, so at this point we'll move into RPB discussion regarding the presentation on ERAs and recommended next steps.
Hi, this is Karen. I guess this question goes to Jesse too along the timeline issue. I just was wondering, well, you're waiting for certain other pieces and of being documented further or whatever. If pieces that are fully blessed, let's put it this way, of the data of the ERA components, can some of that can that start to migrate to the portal? It's just that facts like states like I know, like in New York and New Jersey, we're looking at the New York Bight right now for offshore wind, offshore oil, all sorts of activities. And the more that we have some of this information, I think it would be very helpful for us in for planning and future decision making.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. That's a good point. I would remind the folks on the call that many of the data that we have identified as relevant to each of the ERA components, many of those data are already on the Marco portal in various forms, and we are really mainly trying to find a way to highlight the presence of those data across the portal. And so I think maybe a near-term action that we could also take would be to work with the portal team to get that kind of flagging and highlighting system in place to highlight those layers that are not subject to this update that we're doing as well. And I think that would maybe help you kind of figure out which of the ERA relevant data sets are more stable in terms of being a more final version and not likely to change with this next round of updates.
That would actually be very, very helpful, because then at least we would know that here is the basis of this information. This is okay. Here's information what we've had, which is good as of now, but we're going to be getting an update and an update by some date certain or whatever. I think that would help people to understand, so they can utilize the data more effectively that way.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very helpful.
So just conscious of our time, we probably should move into discussion, more detailed discussion from RPB members as to the two recommendations that were put forward. If there's a preference, keep that going.
Mm-hmm.
Any RPB members discussion? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Kelsey. It's just like I was going to say that I think most people feel very, very comfortable with option one, moving forward on that. Option two is the one where people have some issues about classifying an overlay, and that we were going to do that, those logical breaks, but we're getting updated information, and I guess it's a timing thing, and I see step one, work on step one is option one, step two would be option two, where we're progressing and getting further, and I guess if we lay out a more succinct timeline for folks, that maybe people could become comfortable with that, or?
I guess I have a question. So is the second part of this recommendation that you actually investigate what you can do towards option two and bring that back to the RPB? Is that kind of the goal? So we get to look at that again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And I see in the chat box too, Sarah Winter Whalen had a sort of statement in there recommending how option two can be best integrated into the RPB's work. And so I don't know, Sarah, if what we're saying here addresses that, but the intention would be definitely, simultaneous to working through option one, getting the data organized and on the portal and well communicated, that we would kind of simultaneously be looking at some data sets where we have high confidence and trying to go ahead and apply a statistical scale to them to see what that would look like, and sort of test that proof of concept and bring that back to the RPB for further discussion to see if there's comfort in moving ahead, perhaps with additional data sets that could be classified and overlaid in that manner.
This is going to be a real balancing act between trying to make it, there was a clear expression of interest in getting the data out there and more available and more understood under option one, and more usable, since people feel that it would be really applicable to a lot of things going on right now, and balancing that against looking towards where we might go into the future. So it's going to be juggling back and forth between those two.
Yeah, and trying to find a way for those who aren't necessarily super GIS tech savvy to deal with 75 to 150 different data layers.
So for Laura, and potentially even maybe Tony as a process step question, are you putting forward then, the work group has put forward both of these options, and would you like to go through and see if there's consensus on both individually, and continue with this that way?
I think so, Kelsey. That is the recommendation is really a hybrid between 1 and 2. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So then first, the work group has put forward the recommendation to start with option 1, and is there any objection to that from the RPB members?
No objection.
Okay, so yeah, not hearing any, then I think, Laura, the group is good to move forward on that prong of the recommendation. And then the second part, option 2, as you can see there on the webinar slide, are there any objections to the work group moving forward with their hybrid plan after completing option 1 stage to then go to option 2?
Kelsey, if I could just clarify, it really was one recommendation that combines option 1 and 2, and that we would look into, and we have agreement now that, yes, we want to go ahead with option 1, but we would want to not necessarily sequentially, but simultaneously investigate the feasibility of option 2 by applying the classify and overlay technique to a limited set of data layers.
Thank you for that clarification. So is there any objection from the RPB members for the ERA workgroup to do that plan?
No objection as long as it's implicit that you'll bring whatever work you come up with will come back to the RPB for
Absolutely.
Okay,
yep.
Great.
Yep.
So, Laura, you're looking at more of a pilot of doing certain data sets and
Yes.
looking for logical breaks and seeing
Yes. Yeah.
just to test it out, so people can see that, because
Yeah, what it might look like, and what and whether that looks scientifically valid, and is it free from kind of personal evaluation.
Correct. Is it one standard deviation away, or what
right.
is it? What's the metrics that's being used so that somebody would logically understand that, and
Right.
This is Daryl Francois. I was, wondering if, since we can't really see the option 1, option 2 sort of language that we're voting on, since that's the slide that's up there doesn't have that, is it possible to reconstruct that that statement in the chat box, maybe, as to the hybrid language?
Well, what's up there is it says the work group recommends further effort on option 1 and also recommends further exploration of option 2. The bullets you're seeing under each of those statements are just a rewrite of what each option is. But the recommendation is to go ahead with option 1 and explore option 2. Sorry if that's not been clear to folks.
Thanks for that explanation. So basically, the first, in the second quotation mark, not the bullet, where it says the work group also recommends further exploration of the option 2 approach during 2018.
Yes.
That really captures
yes.
the essence of this hybrid approach.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
just want to make sure.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thanks, Daryl.
Makes sense.
Okay, well, with that clarification, are there any objections to the hybrid plan that allows for exploration of option 2?
None from joint staff.
Okay, well, hearing none, I also don't see anything in the chat box. It looks like Laura and the ERA workgroup, you have approval to move forward with your recommendation.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So I'll turn it back over to, I believe it's Darlene.
Tony, you have anything to say, or you want me to hop in here? We're actually
again, thanks everybody for their comments, and again, this has been recorded, and all the comments will be captured. So I'll just turn it back to the RPBs for any wrap-up comments, to the co-leads, if they'd like to say anything before we conclude the webinar.
So Tony, I have a few comments. I want to thank everybody for bearing with us. A webinar is not really a perfect substitute for an in-person meeting, but we did want to make some decisions and move forward. So I appreciate people getting on the phone with us today and trying to master the technology. I think you did a great job. I heard that people are really interested in timelines. They want to know what we're going to be doing and when we're going to do it. I hear that we're ready to move forward with ocean health indicators, although we do need some additional resources to do all the things on the wish list. I heard that people were very interested in what ERA data is available, where it's going to be available, when it's going to be available, what it is, and that we can move forward with the recommendations that were put out there with ERAs. So Laura and Kelsey, you have remarks, thoughts you'd like to share with everybody?
Kelsey, did you want to go next?
Sure. I think that we're looking forward to being able to schedule our in-person meeting for the summer. Very pleased that we were able to put this webinar together so that we could keep our forward momentum and progress. And I look forward to the work that will be coming out of the work group that presented today, as well as the others that we haven't yet heard from.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes, I just want to thank everyone again, my marine debris work group and the MDAT team and the portal team, all the great work that's going on. I think it really is impressive how much everyone is doing under these difficult circumstances, and it's just really, really appreciated, and thank you, stakeholders. We have a long list of people who have dialed in, so thank you so much for listening and weighing in on these things. And we're always welcome your comments and want to hear from you. We want this Ocean Action Plan to work for everyone. So thanks again. And as we mentioned before, we are looking at a summer in-person RPB meeting, and thanks, Allie. I finally see it's the benchmark table in the front of the work plan that we need to correct, where it said that there would be a meeting in May. So we will get that fixed, and we have a gigantic doodle poll out right now to try to nail down a date. It's looking like late July, early August. It's always hard to find a date that works for everyone, but we will try to nail that down as quick as we can so that people can get it on their calendars. So thanks again, everyone, and we look forward to getting back to our work groups and getting things done.
So this is Darlene again, and I love that all these comments are coming in as we're trying to wrap up. Matt, perfect for starting that. Let me ask that really quickly, and this, I guess, is a question for BOEM. Any additional information on identify new and improve existing stakeholder relationships regarding coordinate around beach renourishment and coastal restoration projects that utilize OCS sand resources? Would you like to respond to Matt or do that at a later time? Daryl, I know, kind of recirculating it back to you at this late in the game.
It is ongoing. Our efforts are ongoing, and as we develop and integrate this MMIS sand inventory with the data portal, that will enable us to have better and more enhanced tools to actually move forward with stakeholder engagement and with a more full data set. And so it is an ongoing effort, and it's an iterative effort as well.
Great, thank you. So my last thank you goes out to the folks who really helped make this webinar happen. I want to thank Tony McDonald for agreeing to facilitate. I want to thank Carl Villikova for last-minute scrambling on graphics. And I do want to thank Shannon Lewinsky, who has helped us tame the technology. She's the real pro here, and and it's amazing how she just keeps this happening without a glitch. So thanks to everyone. I see there are a few more comments coming in. We'll pick them up from the webinar transcript, and I think with that we're actually going to wrap this up a little bit early.
I think we are. I think we are going to adjourn, and again, reminding folks that they can always comment directly by sending an email to BOEM. So this is not closing off comment. It is always open and available, and we will capture everybody who has commented today and look forward to further discussions moving forward. So thank you very much.
Tony?
Yes.
I see there are a couple people still typing. We did say we would run till 1 o'clock. Do we want to just wait a second till those last comments come in? I see Sarah Whalen and Helen Henderson are typing.
And that's certainly up to the RPB. If you'd like to do that, that's your option.
I don't think we want to go back and
again, I think there were clear stakeholder opportunities, and everybody's available to comment. So it's really up to the co-leads whether you want to entertain these or take them under consideration.
Okay, we're done. Thank you for all the comments.
Great. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.